you're going to have to go back and read Genesis chapter 14 and 15 over again. Maybe even go back to chapter 13 in order to get all of the nuances, all of the special information that's there, and not become terribly confused. You see, there are 10 kings that are mentioned there, but only one of them righteous. And he's also referred to as a high priest, which gets a little confusing. And then there's the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, and you'll have to notice that it is plural kings, because we find the kings fleeing Sodom and Gomorrah when they're invaded and falling into a tar pit, but then you find the kings of Sodom negotiating with Abram, trying to offer material blessings for the men that were taken in the battle between Abram and the invading kings. So I go back and read it so that you get it all straight in your mind, because it can get very, very confusing. So we see that Abram rescues Lot. And I've heard lots of people say, well, you can take Lot out of Sodom, but you can't take Sodom out of Lot. But I think Lot shows a little bit better character later. Nevertheless, we find that after Abram has saved Lot and gathered all of the people from Sodom and Gomorrah and the possessions, that Melchizedek, the king of Salem, blesses Abram. And Abram gives him a tenth, a tithe offering. And I think that's really significant, because we also sometimes question what is a tithe and is it a tenth, and yet here we see that Abram offers a tenth, a tithe of worship to this priest, this high priest, Melchizedek. And then we see the fact that Salem is a different place than Sodom. But from Sodom comes a king who offers a deal to Abram, which is, you take the possessions and I'll take the people. Now, why is that significant? Well, first of all, Melchizedek is a type. In typology, he's a type for Christ. And we find that the king of Sodom is a type also, but he's a type for Satan, because he'd rather have souls than material things. And he very often tempts us with material things to sell out our souls. Oh, it's rich if you really go back and read these 2 chapters. And after Abraham, or Abram in this case, refuses the king of Sodom's offer to trade material things for people, we see that God comes in chapter 15 and he reassures Abram. In chapter 15, verse 1, he says, "Do not fear. I am a shield to you. Your reward will be great." Now, Abram's human. And at this point, he has had on his mind the promise that God has already made to him about a land and about a people. And yet he is way up in age and he has no heirs, even though he's been promised that he would. And so he reminds God, not in a nasty way, not in a complaining way, but he says, I'm childless, and I don't understand how you're going to bless me. But he believes God, and the Lord very clearly tells him, he takes him outside and he shows him the stars, and he says, count them, I dare you, count them. And he says, so will your descendants be. Now look at verse 6 of chapter 15. Abram believed the Lord, and it was counted as righteousness. Let me say that again for you. Abram believed the Lord, it was counted as righteousness. We need to believe the Lord a lot more. Now, we can't just willy-nilly take a look at all of the promises of God and say they all apply to me, and therefore I should be able to get anything I want, move mountains by the word of my mouth, and so on. We need to be careful that the promises of God are sometimes made to certain individuals, not to everyone. But when we see John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him but not perish, we see a universal promise. In any case, Abram is reminded that he will have heirs, and they'll be as numerous as the stars in the sky. Now, there's also some other subtleties that you may have missed if you didn't read 14 and 15 carefully. First of all, there's the bread and the wine that is brought by Melchizedek and placed before Abram. Bread and wine are what are symbols? The symbols of the Passover, the symbols of Jesus Christ being the wine and the bread of life. And so we see this beautiful symbolism. We see the worship of Abram giving a tenth. We see the God Most High, possessor of the heavens and the earth title, being mentioned for the first time as a way to describe God. Now, I would just suggest to you for a moment today that you meditate on chapters 14 and 15. Read them carefully, read them over, and then focus in on the title that is given to God here. The God, the Most High, possessor of both heaven and earth. And that's my thought for the day. God bless you and have a wonderful day. Well, when it comes to physical things, Lot was no fool. He saw the land that was well watered, the best land, and instead of saying, why don't you take part of it and I'll take part of it, he took it all. He took all of the best land. And it tells us that he moved towards the cities. But if you'll take a look at chapter 14 and verse 12, you'll find out that Lot wound up in Sodom. You see, it's not a very far distance from the mountaintops and the altar of God to the valley of wickedness. It's a short trip. It only takes a careless act, dwelling on things that are unrighteous. It's a short trip from the place of worship where Abraham had built the altar to Sodom, the wickedness, extreme wickedness, it tells us. Yes, Lot took the best of what was physically there, but he got the worst of what was spiritually there. And Abraham's character shows his generosity, his kindness, and his desire for peace. Characteristics and traits that all Christians should have. And that's my thought for the day. God bless you and have a great day.